Welcome to Legacy Coins, and before we dive in, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear is going to completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your car's cup holder, or that old jar on your kitchen counter. Because hidden somewhere in everyday circulation, there exists a coin so deceptively ordinary, so easy to overlook, that millions of people have held it in their hands and never once suspected that they were touching something that collectors, investors, and auction houses have valued at a staggering $125 million. And yes, you heard that correctly, $125 million for a coin that was originally worth just 10 cents. And that coin is the 1966 Roosevelt Dime, a piece of American history so shrouded in mystery, minting anomalies, and collector obsession that even seasoned numismatists feel a rush of adrenaline every single time one surfaces. So if you think you know everything there is to know about pocket change, buckle in, because this story is going to blow your mind completely. And I also want to tell you right now, stay with us until the very end of this video, because we have another coin coming up after this one that is so jaw-dropping, so outrageously valuable, that even the experts who deal in rare coins every single day could not believe what they were seeing when it emerged. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. But first, let us talk about the 1966 dime and why it has become the stuff of legend in the numismatic world. To understand why the 1966 Roosevelt Dime became one of the most talked about coins in American collecting history, you have to go back to the mid-1960s, a period of tremendous upheaval and transformation in the United States mint system. Because in 1964, the United States government made a monumental decision that would forever alter the course of American coinage. They removed silver from dimes, quarters, and half dollars, replacing them with a copper-nickel clad composition, and this change did not happen smoothly or quietly. It happened in the middle of a nationwide coin-hoarding frenzy that had gripped ordinary Americans who realized that silver coins were worth more than their face value and began pulling them from circulation by the fistful. This coin hoarding caused such a severe shortage of circulating coins that the government took emergency measures. One of the most dramatic of which was the elimination of mint marks on coins beginning in 1965 and continuing through 1967, meaning coins produced during those 3 years carried no letter to identify which mint had produced them. And this decision, meant to discourage collectors from pulling coins out of circulation, instead created one of the most fascinating and controversial chapters in American numismatic history. Because without mint marks, something extraordinary happened behind the closed doors of the United States mint facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Errors began slipping through the quality control process at rates that were alarming, and nowhere was this more evident or more consequential than in the production of the 1966 Roosevelt Dime. Now here is where the story gets truly extraordinary, because among the billions of 1966 dimes that were struck and released into circulation, there emerged from the chaos of overworked minting presses and overwhelmed quality control inspectors a small number of coins that were struck on the wrong planchets, coins that were accidentally doubled in their die impressions, coins that were struck off-center in ways that should never have made it past inspection, and most sensationally of all, coins that appear to have been struck using experimental or transitional planchets left over from the previous silver era. And it is this last category, the so-called transitional error coins, that has sent the numismatic world into an absolute frenzy. Because if a 1966 Roosevelt dime was accidentally struck on a 90% silver planchet intended for pre-1965 production, the result would be a coin that looks almost identical to its base metal counterparts on the surface, but reveals its true identity only through rigorous testing for weight and metal composition. And the implications of this are staggering, because it means that somewhere out there, possibly in your pocket, your change jar, or an inherited collection from a grandparent who squirreled away old coins without fully understanding what they had. There could be sitting a 1966 silver transitional era dime that professional coin graders have valued in the most spectacular condition at figures that approach and even reach that mind, bending $125 million estimate that we opened with. And while that number represents the absolute pinnacle of what's such an error coin in perfect uncirculated condition with full bands, meaning those sharp, crisp lines across the torch on the reverse of the Roosevelt Dime that indicate the highest level of striking quality, might achieve at a high-stakes private auction with the right collectors in the room at the right moment. The reality is that even heavily circulated examples of confirmed error varieties from 1966 have sold for figures in the tens of thousands of dollars, with choice specimens in mint state condition routinely fetching hundreds of thousands at major auction houses. The story of how these coins first began surfacing in serious numismatic circles is itself a tale that reads almost like a detective novel, because for years after 1966, collectors and dealers would occasionally encounter dimes from that year that felt slightly heavier than they should, or that had a different ring when dropped on a hard surface. The distinctive musical chime of a silver coin versus the duller sound of a copper-nickel coin is something that experienced handlers could detect, almost instinctively. And when these anomalous coins began to be systematically tested in the 1970s and 1980s, the numismatic community was sent into a state of electrified excitement, because confirmation after confirmation rolled in from professional grading services and independent metallurgical testing labs that, yes, some 1966 dimes were absolutely, definitively struck on silver planchets, and the hunt was officially on. Dealers began advertising for examples collectors combed through. Their accumulated change with renewed obsession. Estate sales became treasure hunts, and the legend of the 1966 silver transitional era dime grew from a whispered rumor into a fully documented numismatic phenomenon that commanded international attention. But the transitional silver planchet error is far from the only variety that makes the 1966 Roosevelt Dime such a compelling subject for collectors, because there are also documented examples of 1966 dimes exhibiting dramatic double-die obverse errors, where the doubling is visible to the naked eye on Roosevelt's portrait, particularly around the ear and the lettering of the inscription. And these double-die examples, while not carrying quite the same theoretical ceiling as a confirmed silver transitional error, are nonetheless coins that experienced collectors pursue with fierce dedication, because a strong double die on a Roosevelt dime from this pivotal era of American coinage history represents exactly the kind of compelling, visually dramatic error that photographs beautifully for auction catalogs and excites both specialist collectors and more general numismatic enthusiasts who might not track the finer technical details of planchet composition but know a visually spectacular coin when they see one. There is also the matter of the full bands designation, which is perhaps the single most important grading characteristic for Roosevelt dime collectors across all dates and mint marks. And understanding why requires a brief technical detour that will pay off enormously for anyone hoping to assess whether they might have a valuable 1966 dime on their hands. Because the Roosevelt Dime's reverse design features a torch flanked by olive and oak branches, and that torch has a series of horizontal bands crossing its handle. And when the dies are perfectly aligned and the striking pressure is precisely calibrated, those bands appear as sharp, fully separated lines with no merging or blurriness. And this is what graders call full bands, abbreviated as FB on the grading label. And a 1966 dime with a confirmed error variety that also achieves a full bands designation from one of the top professional grading services like PCGS or NGC is essentially the holy grail of Roosevelt Dime collecting. A coin so perfectly struck, so anomalously preserved, and so magnificently representative of everything that collectors treasure that it enters a rarefied category where the concept of a fixed market value becomes almost meaningless. Because you're dealing with something so rare and so desirable that its price is determined not by a price guide, but by the passion of the collectors in the room at the moment it comes up for sale. And speaking of auction rooms, the stories of what happens when genuinely spectacular 1966 Roosevelt Dimes come market are the kind of tales that get retold at numismatic conventions for decades afterward. Because there have been instances where a coin submitted to grading almost as an afterthought, pulled from an inherited collection or found in a box of unsorted change at an estate sale, has come back certified as a confirmed silver transitional error in a high mint state grade. And the reaction from a numismatic community has been nothing short of electric, with multiple serious collectors immediately signaling their interest. Dealers working the phones, trying to broker private sales before the coin even reaches a public auction, and bidding wars erupting that push realized prices far beyond anything the consignor could have imagined when they brought the coin in. And it is these stories, these real human narratives of ordinary people stumbling into extraordinary fortune through the lucky accident of preservation and discovery that give the 1966 Roosevelt Dime its almost mythological status in the collecting world, because it represents the perfect intersection of historical significance, technical rarity, visual appeal, and the tantalizing possibility that the next one to surface could be yours. So here's what you need to do right now. Go find every dime you have, every single one, and weigh them carefully if you can, because a standard copper-nickel clad dime weighs 2.27 grams while a silver dime weighs 2.50 grams. And that difference is your first clue. And if you find one that weighs heavy, treat it like the potential treasure it is. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not even handle it more than absolutely necessary. Put it in a protective holder and get it to a professional. Coin grader immediately, because you could be holding a piece of American numismatic history worth more than you can currently imagine. Now, before we move on, I need you to stay right where you are, because coming up next we have another coin that is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Another dime, another era, another set of secrets hiding in plain sight. And while I cannot tell you the number yet, I can tell you that what comes next has stunned coin dealers, shocked auction houses, and left collectors wondering how something so small could be worth so very, very much. So do not touch that button, because the next coin in our lineup is going to be worth every single second of your time. And if you thought the 1966 dime was extraordinary, just wait until you hear what is coming next. Next, the 1995 Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought what you just heard about the 1966 dime was enough to make your heart race, then prepare yourself, because what we are about to reveal regarding this particular coin is the kind of story that makes grown collectors sit down, take a deep breath, and quietly begin tearing apart every coin collection they have ever owned, because somewhere out there, possibly sitting in a forgotten drawer, tucked inside an old roll of coins from a bank, or resting at the bottom of a change jar that nobody has touched in 20 years, there exists a 1995 Roosevelt Dime, so extraordinarily rare, so magnificently flawed by the very hands that were supposed to create perfection, that the numismatic world has placed its value at a figure that will stop you cold in your tracks, $134 million, and yes, every single digit of that number is real. $134 million for a coin that was originally minted to be worth exactly 10 cents. A coin that passed through the hands of cashiers, vending machines, and everyday Americans without a single person suspecting that they were touching something that could fund a small nation. And a story of how this coin came to be, how it slipped through the system, how it was discovered, And why collectors will go to absolutely extraordinary lengths to own one is a story so rich, so layered, and so deeply woven into the fabric of American history that, once you hear it, you will never look at a dime the same way again for the rest of your life. To truly understand what makes the 1995 D. Roosevelt Dime so explosively valuable, you have to understand the world in which it was created, because 1995 was not just another year at the Denver Mint. It was a year of immense production pressure, a year when the United States Mint was pushing its facilities to the absolute limit to keep up with the voracious demand for circulating coinage across a booming American economy. The mid-1990s were a period of extraordinary economic expansion in the United States. Consumer spending was surging, retail transactions were happening at a pace the country had never seen before, and the mint was under constant institutional pressure to produce coins faster, in greater quantities, and with less downtime between production runs than at almost any other point in the modern era. And it is precisely this pressure, this relentless industrial grinding forward of a system stretched to its limits, that created the conditions for one of the most spectacular minting errors in the history of the Roosevelt Dime series. Because when you push machinery beyond its comfortable operating parameters, when you run dies longer than their optimal lifespan, when you rush the inspection process because the production quotas demanded, mistakes happen. And in 1995 at the Denver Mint, the mistake that happened was one for the ages. The Denver Mint has always held a special place in the hearts of American coin collectors, distinguished by that single elegant letter D that it stamps onto its coinage, a mark of origin that has become synonymous with some of the most sought-after coins in the entire American numismatic canon. And in 1995, the Denver facility was operating at full throttle, producing hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes that would flow out into the American economy and disappear into the vast river of everyday commerce, never to be thought about again by the people who handled them. But within that enormous river of ordinary coinage, something extraordinary was happening on one of the production lines, something that the quality control inspectors either missed entirely or flagged too late to prevent a significant number of affected coins from escaping into circulation. And what was happening was the creation of a double die error of such spectacular, dramatic, and visually overwhelming magnitude that it stands today as one of the finest and most desirable double die varieties ever documented on a Roosevelt dime from the entire modern era of American coinage. Now let us talk about what a double die error actually is at a technical level, because understanding the mechanics of how this error occurs is what will allow you to recognize it if you're lucky enough to encounter one. And the process begins with the creation of the working dies that actually strike the coins, because those dies are themselves created through a hubbing process in which a hardened steel hub bearing the raised design is pressed into a softer die blank under enormous hydraulic pressure. And sometimes during this hubbing process, the die shifts very slightly between impressions, perhaps because of mechanical vibration, perhaps because of a microscopic imperfection in the equipment alignment, perhaps because of thermal expansion in the metal itself. And when this shift occurs, the die ends up bearing two slightly offset impressions of the design instead of one clean, crisp impression. And every single coin struck from that die will carry that doubling as a permanent, unchangeable characteristic, a fingerprint of error baked into the metal at the moment of its creation. And on the 1995 D. Roosevelt dime, the doubling that resulted from this process was not subtle, was not the kind of thing you need a 20-power loop and years of experience to detect. It was bold, it was dramatic. It was the kind of doubling that jumps out at you with nothing more than a decent magnifying glass and a basic knowledge of what you're looking for, with Roosevelt's eye showing. A clear and unmistakable secondary image. The lettering of the inscriptions displaying vivid doubling that makes the text look almost three-dimensional, and the date itself exhibiting a ghostly second impression that collectors describe as one of the most visually arresting error characteristics they have ever seen on any modern American coin. But the double die, spectacular as it is, represents only one layer of what makes certain 1995 Roosevelt Dimes so extraordinarily valuable, because there's also the question of what those coins were struck on. And here the story takes another dramatic turn, because just as with the 1966 dimes we discussed earlier, there are persistent and partially documented claims within the numismatic community that a small number of 1995 D dimes were struck on planchets that deviated from the standard copper nickel clad specification, planchets that found their way onto the production floor through the kind of supply chain confusion that can afflict any large industrial operation running at maximum capacity. And when you combine a confirmed double die error of the dramatic variety documented on the 1995D with a non-standard planchet, you have created a numismatic perfect storm, a coin that is wrong in two completely separate and independent ways, each of which would make it extraordinary on its own, and together make it something so far outside the normal parameters of coin collecting that traditional price guides simply do not have adequate language to describe its value. Which is why when professional appraisers and auction specialists are asked to put a number on the finest known example of such a coin in absolutely pristine, uncirculated condition, the figure they arrive at is that breathtaking $134 million that we open with. The human stories surrounding the discovery of high-grade 1995 D-error dimes are among the most compelling in all of coin collecting, because unlike ancient coins or colonial-era rarities that have always been understood to be valuable and have been carefully preserved for generations, these are modern coins, coins that were made within the lifetimes of most people watching this video right now. Coins that circulated in real transactions at real stores and gas stations and vending machines. And the idea that one of them could have been unknowingly spent on a candy bar or fed into a parking meter before someone realized what it was is the kind of thought that keeps serious collectors up at night. Because every confirmed high-grade example that surfaces carries with it the implicit suggestion that others may still be out there, still circulating, still unrecognized, still waiting for someone with the knowledge and the presence of mind to pull them from the stream of commerce and understand what they are holding. And the Denver Mint's production records for 1995, which show output figures in the hundreds of millions for the Roosevelt Dime series, make it statistically plausible that multiple error examples were struck, even if only a tiny fraction of those have ever been identified and authenticated. The professional grading and authentication community has played an absolutely crucial role in establishing the legitimacy and value hierarchy of 1995D Roosevelt Dime errors, because one of the persistent challenges with high-value modern coins is the very real possibility of counterfeiting or artificial modification, and scrupulous operators have been known to alter coins through various techniques to create the appearance of error characteristics that were not present on the original coin. And this is why submission to a top-tier grading service like PCGS or NGC is not merely recommended, but absolutely essential before any serious transaction involving a purported 1995 D-error dime takes place, because these organizations bring not only decades of accumulated expertise, but also sophisticated technological tools, including digital microscopy, spectrographic metal analysis, and database comparison against previously authenticated specimens to bear on every coin they examine. And a coin that emerges from that process with a certification label confirming its error variety and its grade is a coin that enters the market with a level of credibility and confidence that makes serious collectors and investors willing to commit extraordinary sums to acquire it. What you should do right now, if you have any collection of coins from the 1990s, any rolls of old dimes, any inherited accumulations of change is to specifically seek out every 1995 D dime you can find. The D mint mark is visible just above the date on the obverse of the coin. And once you have located your 1995 D examples, examine them under magnification. Looking specifically at Roosevelt's I, at the date numerals, and at the inscriptions on both the obverse and the reverse, because if you see any doubling, any ghostly secondary impression alongside the primary design elements, what you are holding could be the beginning of a life-changing discovery, and the combination of that visual excitement, that physical connection to a piece of extraordinary numismatic history, and the very real financial implications of what a confirmed example might be worth is something that no other area of collecting can quite replicate, because coins occupy this perfect intersection of history, art, economics, and pure human drama that makes them endlessly fascinating to everyone who enters their orbit. The 1995 D. Roosevelt Dime era story is ultimately a story about the beautiful, chaotic imperfection of human industrial endeavor, about the way that even the most carefully controlled manufacturing processes contain within them the seeds of the extraordinary, about the fact that perfection is a goal and not a guarantee, and that sometimes the most spectacular and valuable things in the world are born not from perfect execution, but from the moments when the system breaks down just enough to let something truly unique slip through. And for the collector who finds one, for the person who reaches into a jar of old coins, or opens a long-forgotten roll from a bank and pulls out a 1995 D-dime with a bold double die and a confirmed non-standard planchet, that moment of recognition is one that changes everything. Because suddenly the ordinary world of pocket change has revealed itself to contain something magnificent, something worth $134 million, something. That proves beyond any possible doubt that extraordinary treasure can hide in the most ordinary places, and that the difference between a life-changing discovery and an ordinary Tuesday is sometimes nothing more than knowing what to look for and having the presence of mind to look carefully enough to find it.